Millionaire is sentenced to pay 980 millers to his pregnant ex-wife until a poor 7-year-old girl storms the court and reveals a truth that leaves everyone frozen. Before we tell this tale, hit like and comment where you're watching from, and one word that describes you. The gavel's thunderous bang echoed through the marble courtroom as Judge Patricia Morrison prepared to deliver what would become the most expensive divorce settlement in Chicago's history. Billionaire real estate mogul Richard Blackwood sat rigid in his Armani suit, his weathered 62-year-old hands gripping the mahogany table until his knuckles turned white. The October morning light filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the packed gallery where reporters waited with bated breath. "Mr. Blackwood," Judge Morrison's voice cut through the tension like a blade, "you are hereby ordered to pay $980 million to your ex-wife, Victoria Blackwood, for the care and support of your unborn child." Victoria, 38 and 6 months pregnant, dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief while her lawyer whispered congratulations. She'd played her cards perfectly. The secret pregnancy revealed just days before their divorce finalization, the carefully orchestrated emotional breakdown in previous hearings, and now the largest settlement in state history. Her designer maternity dress fit perfectly, accentuating her growing belly that would secure her financial future forever. Richard's lawyer, James Patterson, 55 years of experience etched in every wrinkle of his weathered face, leaned forward desperately. His voice trembled with desperation as he made one final plea. "Your Honor, my client maintains that paternity has not been established. We request a DNA test before any financial obligations are—" "The child is clearly his," Victoria's attorney interrupted, his voice booming across the courtroom. "Mrs. Blackwood was faithful throughout their 20-year marriage. Mr. Blackwood's attempts to deny his own child are nothing but cruel manipulation tactics designed to avoid his financial responsibilities." Richard's jaw tightened as memories flooded back. 20 years of marriage, countless fertility treatments, endless doctor visits where he was told he was the problem. Victoria had convinced him that his inability to father children was destroying their marriage. She'd cried, begged, pleaded for him to try harder, do more, spend more on treatments, and she'd waited until now, until their divorce was nearly final, to reveal a pregnancy. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong, but every attempt to question the timeline had been shut down by the court. The packed courtroom buzzed with whispers. News cameras rolled from the gallery, capturing every moment of what reporters were already calling the billion-dollar baby trial. Richard could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes watching his humiliation unfold in real time. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom burst open with a tremendous crash that made everyone jump. Every head turned as a small figure darted down the center aisle, a 7-year-old girl with wild auburn curls and a tattered yellow dress that had seen better days, clutching something tightly in her small, dirt-stained fist. "Wait, wait! You can't do this!" she screamed, her voice piercing through the formal atmosphere like a siren cutting through the night. Her bare feet slapped against the marble floor as she ran. Security guards immediately moved toward the child with practiced efficiency, but Judge Morrison raised her hand, her curiosity overriding decades of strict courtroom protocol. The little girl was clearly poor. Her canvas shoes had holes worn through the soles, her dress was patched in multiple places with different colored fabric, and her face bore the telltale signs of someone who'd been living rough. Dark circles under her bright green eyes spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry far beyond her tender 7 years. "Stop right there!" the girl shouted with surprising authority, positioning herself directly in front of Richard's table like a tiny warrior facing an army. Her green eyes blazed with determination that seemed impossible for someone so young. "Mr. Blackwood isn't the daddy. I have proof right here in my hand." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, spectators gasped and pointed, while Victoria's face went ashen white as if she'd seen a ghost rise from the grave. Her brother Marcus Blackwood, 45, and Richard's business partner for the past 15 years, suddenly stood from his seat in the gallery, his face flushed red with panic. "Get that child out of here immediately. This is absolutely ridiculous. Judge Morrison, you can't allow this disruption." "Silence." Judge Morrison banged her gavel repeatedly, the sound echoing off the high ceilings like gunshots. "Young lady, what's your name and how did you get into my courtroom?" "Emma Thompson," the girl replied, never taking her fierce gaze off Richard. Despite her obvious poverty and fear, she stood tall and proud. "My mama worked for Mrs. Blackwood's family before she died from the cancer. I lived in their servant quarters until 3 months ago when they kicked me out." Richard studied the child's face intently, a memory tugging at his consciousness like a half-remembered dream. He remembered seeing her occasionally when visiting Marcus's sprawling estate on the outskirts of Chicago, but he'd never paid much attention to the servant children who lived in the background of their wealthy world. Now, looking closer, something about her fierce determination and stubborn chin reminded him powerfully of himself at that age, fighting against a world that seemed determined to crush him. "What proof could you possibly have?" Victoria's lawyer demanded, his previous confidence wavering for the first time all day. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the courtroom's air conditioning. Emma held up a manila envelope, worn and creased from constant handling, its edges soft with age. "DNA test results, the real ones. Mrs. Blackwood, she had the baby tested, but not with Mr. Richard's DNA like everyone thinks." Her small voice carried across the now silent courtroom with perfect clarity. "She tested it with Uncle Marcus's DNA instead, and the paper says he's the real daddy." Marcus shot to his feet so fast his chair fell backward with a crash, his face now purple with rage and fear. "This is completely insane. Judge Morrison, you cannot possibly entertain the ravings of a homeless child who—" "Uncle Marcus." Judge Morrison's eyebrows raised in surprise as pieces began clicking into place. "Mr. Marcus Blackwood, you're Richard Blackwood's younger brother and business partner, correct?" Judge Morrison's 25 years on the bench had shown her every conceivable type of courtroom drama, from bitter custody battles to complex financial disputes. But something about this child's unwavering conviction made her pause. The girl's voice hadn't wavered once. Her story remained consistent, and her eyes held a truth that experienced judges learned to recognize. "Emma," Judge Morrison said gently, "how did you come to possess these alleged DNA results? This is a very serious accusation you're making." Emma's chin trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady as granite. "After Mama died from the cancer 6 months ago, I kept living in the servant room at Uncle Marcus's big house because nobody knew what to do with me. Nobody really noticed me much. I'm real good at being quiet and invisible. So I heard things, lots of things that grown-ups say when they think no children are listening." The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the heating system humming and the faint tick of the ancient clock on the wall. Richard's face had gone pale as pieces of a horrifying puzzle began forming in his mind, creating a picture he'd never wanted to see. Mrs. Victoria would come visit Uncle Marcus almost every week when Mr. Richard was traveling for business, Emma continued, her 7-year-old innocence making the revelation even more devastating. They would hug and kiss like married people do, not like brother and sister. And Mrs. Victoria, she was always crying about how she couldn't have babies with Mr. Richard no matter how hard they tried. But then she got pregnant, and Uncle Marcus, he was so happy he danced around his office. Marcus stood frozen like a statue, beads of sweat forming on his forehead and upper lip, despite the cool October air conditioning. His expensive suit suddenly looked rumpled, his perfectly styled hair mussed from running his hands through it nervously. "Judge Morrison, this child is clearly coached and rehearsed. Her statements are pure hearsay and should not be—" "Let her finish," Richard said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of 20 years of betrayal. For 2 decades he'd wondered why Victoria could never conceive despite numerous expensive fertility treatments. For 20 long years he'd blamed himself, undergone countless humiliating tests, suffered in silent shame while specialists told him he was the problem. Now, a 7-year-old homeless girl was unraveling the cruelest truth he could have imagined. When Mrs. Victoria found out about the baby growing in her belly, she was real scared, Emma continued, her small hands shaking as she held the envelope. So she and Uncle Marcus, they went to a special doctor place to get the baby tested, but they didn't test it with Mr. Richard's DNA like they should have if he was really the daddy. They tested it with Uncle Marcus's DNA instead, and the paper came back saying Uncle Marcus was 99.7% sure to be the real father. Victoria's lawyer grabbed her arm, whispering urgently in her ear with growing desperation. But she was staring at Emma like she'd seen the devil himself rise up from hell. How would a 7-year-old child even know what a DNA test document looks like? He challenged desperately, grasping at any possible defense. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice never broke. Because when my mama got real sick with the cancer, the doctors had to do lots and lots of tests to find out what kind it was and how bad it had spread. I spent months in hospitals and doctor offices while Mama got sicker and sicker. I know what all kinds of medical papers look like, and I can read real good. Mama taught me before she went to heaven. Judge Morrison extended her hand toward Emma with the solemnity of accepting evidence in a murder trial. May I please examine that document? As Emma walked forward on unsteady legs, her worn shoes making no sound on the marble floor, Richard's mind raced through 20 years of marriage, searching desperately for signs he'd missed. Victoria's frequent unexplained trips to visit family, Marcus's guilty expressions during family gatherings that Richard had dismissed as business stress. The way they'd both insisted DNA testing was unnecessary and insulting during the divorce proceedings. How many red flags had he ignored in his blind trust? Your Honor, Victoria's attorney made one final desperate attempt to salvage the unsalvageable, his voice cracking with stress. Even if this document exists, proper chain of custody hasn't been established. We have no way of knowing where this child obtained. I took it from Uncle Marcus's private office, Emma said, with simple honesty that cut through all the legal maneuvering. After they kicked me out 3 months ago when the neighbors started asking questions about why a little girl was living all alone in the servant house, I snuck back one night to get my mama's jewelry box. That's when I found these papers hidden in Uncle Marcus's desk drawer, way in the back behind all his business files. Judge Morrison examined the document carefully, her experienced eyes scanning every detail with the precision of a detective. The letterhead was legitimate. Chicago Medical Laboratory, established 1987 with all the proper certifications. The dates aligned perfectly with Victoria's pregnancy timeline. The signatures appeared completely authentic, bearing official seals and witness marks. This wasn't some crude forgery created by a desperate child. This document is dated 4 months ago, Judge Morrison announced to the breathless courtroom. It clearly states that Marcus Blackwood has a 99.7% probability of being the biological father of the child Victoria Blackwood is currently carrying. Victoria let out a strangled sob that echoed off the courtroom walls and collapsed into her chair, her hands covering her face as her perfect facade crumbled completely. 20 years of lies were unraveling in minutes, destroyed by a homeless child's conscience. Marcus, seeing his carefully constructed world crumbling around him like a house of cards, made one last desperate play. Judge Morrison, you must understand, my brother has been struggling financially for months. Real estate markets have been brutal. He could have easily fabricated this document to avoid paying the settlement. This homeless child could be part of an elaborate, expensive scheme. Struggling financially? Richard's voice was deadly quiet, carrying the chill of absolute betrayal. Marcus, you've been my business partner for 15 years. You've had complete access to all my financial records. You know exactly what my financial status is, down to the last penny. Emma stepped closer to Richard's table, her small, dirty hand reaching out to touch his arm with surprising gentleness. Mr. Richard, I'm real sorry about what they did to you. It ain't right and it ain't fair. My mama always told me you were the kindest of all the rich people because you never looked at us servants like we were invisible or worthless. You always said please and thank you and asked about our families. Something cracked open in Richard's chest, a mixture of rage at the unthinkable betrayal and an unexpected protective instinct toward this brave little girl who had sacrificed her safety to reveal the truth. The courtroom was so silent that Emma's quiet breathing seemed amplified tenfold. Richard felt something fundamental shift inside his chest, a mixture of white-hot rage at the betrayal by the two people he'd trusted most in the world, and an unexpected, fierce, protective instinct toward this brave little girl who had sacrificed her own safety and security to reveal the truth. She could have stayed invisible, stayed safe, but instead she'd risked everything for justice. Judge Morrison set the DNA document on her desk with the reverence due to evidence that would change lives forever, her expression grave and thoughtful. Mr. Marcus Blackwood, Mrs. Victoria Blackwood, I'm ordering an immediate halt to these proceedings pending a full investigation. Court officers, please escort Mrs. Blackwood and Mr. Marcus Blackwood to separate holding areas for detailed questioning. You cannot do this to me, Victoria screamed as officers approached, her voice shrill with panic and desperation. That child is lying through her teeth. She's been coached and paid. Richard, you know I would never betray you like this. 20 years of marriage must count for something. 20 years, Victoria. Richard's voice cut through her protests like ice, each word deliberate and final. 20 years of you telling me I was broken, that I was the problem, that I was failing you as a husband. 20 years of fertility treatments that you knew would never work because you were sleeping with my own brother behind my back. Marcus tried to slip toward the back exit with the stealth of a guilty man, but two large court officers blocked his path effectively. His face had gone from red to grey, sweat staining his expensive shirt. Richard, please listen to me carefully. It's not what it looks like. Victoria seduced me during a moment of weakness. I was lonely. My marriage was falling apart, but I never intended for this to happen. You never intended to get caught, Richard finished with brutal honesty. How long, Marcus? How long were you planning to let me pay nearly $1 billion for your child? How long were you going to watch me suffer, thinking I was paying for my own flesh and blood? Emma tugged gently on Richard's suit jacket with her small fingers. When he looked down, her green eyes were filled with wisdom beyond her 7 years, the kind of wisdom that only comes from profound loss and hardship. Mr. Richard, my mama used to tell me that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who were supposed to love us the most. But that doesn't mean we're not worthy of real love. It just means they weren't worthy of ours. Judge Morrison overheard the child's words and paused in her instructions to the officers, clearly moved. This child's emotional maturity was extraordinary, forged no doubt by loss and hardship that no 7-year-old should ever have to endure alone. Emma, Judge Morrison called gently, do you have any family members? Anyone who's been taking care of you since your mother passed away? Emma shook her head sadly, her auburn curls bouncing. Just me now, Your Honor, but I'm okay, really I am. I'm real good at taking care of myself. I know how to find food and safe places to sleep, and I stay away from bad people. Richard stood slowly, his 62-year-old frame feeling both infinitely heavier with the weight of betrayal and strangely lighter with the burden of truth finally, completely revealed. He looked down at Emma, this tiny warrior who had saved him from the cruelest deception imaginable, and felt his heart breaking for her courage. Emma, he said softly, would you like to come have lunch with me? And maybe we can talk about finding you a proper, safe place to stay? Emma's eyes widened with a mixture of hope and fear, emotions warring across her young face. You really want to have lunch with me, even though I'm just a poor kid with dirty clothes and no family? Especially because you're the bravest, most honest person in this entire courtroom, Richard replied with complete sincerity, extending his hand to her like a lifeline. As Emma placed her small, dirt-stained hand in Richard's large, manicured one, something shifted in the very atmosphere of the courtroom. Even the hardened court officers, who had seen every form of human drama imaginable, seemed moved by the sight of the billionaire and the homeless child forming an unlikely alliance built on truth and courage. Judge Morrison addressed the room with unusual emotion, coloring her typically professional demeanor, her voice carrying the weight of genuine feeling. In 25 years on this bench, I've witnessed greed, manipulation, and deception in countless forms. I've seen families torn apart by money, children used as pawns, and truth buried under mountains of lies. But I've rarely, if ever, seen courage like this child has demonstrated today. Mr. Blackwood, the settlement order is hereby suspended pending full DNA verification and complete investigation into possible fraud charges. Victoria was led away, sobbing hysterically, her perfect blonde hair disheveled, her designer maternity dress wrinkled from stress and panic. She looked back over her shoulder with desperate eyes. "Richard, please. You have to understand, I was so lonely. You were always working, traveling, building your empire, and Marcus was there when you weren't. It just happened. It wasn't planned. Save it for your attorney," Richard said without even looking at her, his voice carrying the finality of a coffin lid closing. 20 years, Victoria. You didn't just betray me. You stole 20 years of my life, made me question my worth as a man, as a husband. That's unforgivable. Marcus, handcuffed and flanked by officers like a common criminal, made one final desperate appeal to his older brother. "Richard, we're family. We're blood, brothers who built an empire together. Surely we can work something out, find a way to move past this unfortunate situation. We were family," Richard corrected, his voice heavy with the finality of death itself. "Family doesn't do what you did. Family doesn't watch their brother suffer and blame himself while secretly destroying his marriage. You're no brother of mine." As the court officers removed Victoria and Marcus from the courtroom, like the criminals they were, Emma pressed closer to Richard's side, her small body seeking protection and comfort. "Mr. Richard, are you going to be okay? I know it hurts real bad when people you love with your whole heart lie to you and betray you. When my mama died, I thought the world was ending, but somehow I kept going." Richard looked down at her, amazed by her capacity for empathy despite everything she'd endured. Here was a child who had lost her mother to cancer, been abandoned by everyone who should have protected her, forced to live on the dangerous streets alone, and yet she was worried about his emotional well-being. Her selflessness was humbling and inspiring. "I think I'm going to be better than I've been in a very long time," he said with complete honesty, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Thanks to your incredible courage, Emma. You saved me from a lie that could have destroyed the rest of my life." Judge Morrison approached them as the courtroom slowly emptied, reporters rushing out to file their stories about the most dramatic court case Chicago had seen in decades. "Mr. Blackwood, given the extraordinary circumstances, I'm recommending a full federal investigation into your brother and ex-wife's financial records. If they've been defrauding you beyond this settlement attempt, we'll uncover every penny and hold them accountable." She then knelt down to Emma's level, her formal judicial demeanor softening. "Young lady, what you did today was not just brave, it was heroic. You risked everything to tell the truth. But I need to ask, where will you be staying tonight? I cannot in good conscience allow a 7-year-old child to return to living on the streets." Emma looked up at Richard with hopeful eyes that sparkled with possibility. "Mr. Richard, I don't want to be a bother or cause you any trouble, but if you maybe had a spare room somewhere just for tonight, I promise I'm real quiet and I don't eat much food." Richard felt his heart breaking and healing simultaneously, two opposite emotions flooding through him at once. "Emma, I have a very large house with many spare rooms that never get used, and honestly, I think I'd like the company very much, if you're willing to trust me." Emma nodded eagerly, then her expression grew serious and thoughtful. "But Mr. Richard, I gotta tell you something important about me. I ain't just a regular quiet kid. I'd been taking care of myself for months, and I got lots of opinions about things, and I ask tons of questions, and I don't always do what adults tell me to do. For the first time in months, Richard Blackwood smiled. Really, genuinely smiled with pure joy. Emma, I think that's exactly what I need in my life right now. 3 weeks after the courtroom revelation, Richard's sprawling mansion in Lincoln Park had been transformed from a cold, sterile monument to wealth into something resembling a home. Emma's laughter echoed through halls that hadn't heard genuine joy in decades. She'd chosen the bedroom with the best view of Lake Michigan, and Richard had it completely redecorated in soft pastels with child-appropriate furniture, books, and toys she'd never dreamed of owning. "Mr. Richard!" Emma called from the kitchen, where she was attempting to make pancakes with the bemused help of Margaret, the long-time housekeeper. "The lawyer man is here again, and he looks real serious this time." James Patterson entered the sunny breakfast room carrying a thick manila folder, his expression grim. At 55, he'd handled countless difficult cases, but the depth of Marcus and Victoria's betrayal still shocked him. "Richard, we need to talk. The forensic accountants have finished their preliminary investigation, and what they've found is far worse than we imagined." Emma looked up from her pancake batter, syrup already smeared on her cheek. She'd gained 10 pounds in 3 weeks, her hollow cheeks filling out, her eyes bright with security for the first time in months. "Is this about Uncle Marcus being extra bad? Because I could have told you he was rotten to the core." "Emma's insights have been remarkably accurate," Richard said, pouring himself coffee. "What did they find, James?" Patterson opened the folder with the solemnity of a coroner's report. "Marcus has been embezzling from Blackwood Enterprises for over 8 years. We're talking about systematic theft totaling $47 million, fake invoices, phantom construction projects, inflated contractor costs. He covered his tracks well, but not well enough." Emma stopped stirring her batter, her 7-year-old mind processing the implications. 47 million, that's like more money than I could count in my whole life. "Much more, sweetheart," Richard said, his jaw tightening. "James, how did he hide it for so long?" "Your trust in him," Patterson replied bluntly. "You gave him complete financial authority over the construction division. He used that access to create an elaborate web of fake companies, all leading back to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Victoria knew about it. We found email evidence of her helping him launder the money through art purchases and jewelry." The revelation hit Richard like a physical blow. Not only had they betrayed him emotionally, but they'd been systematically stealing from the company he'd built from nothing. What about the other employees? How many jobs will this affect? "That's the hardest part," Patterson admitted. "Marcus used the embezzled funds to pay himself bonuses and fund his lavish lifestyle. The construction division is technically insolvent. We might have to let go of 300 employees before Christmas." Emma set down her whisk and walked over to Richard, placing her small hand on his arm. "Mr. Richard, those people have families, don't they? Kids who need their daddies to have jobs?" "Yes, they do," Richard said quietly, struck once again by her empathy. "Then we gotta find a way to help them," Emma said with the simple certainty of childhood. "You got lots of money, right? And bad people stole some. But you still got enough to help the good people." Patterson watched this exchange with fascination. In 3 weeks, this child had become Richard's moral compass, her innocent questions cutting straight to the heart of complex ethical issues. "There might be a way," Patterson said thoughtfully. "If we can recover the stolen funds, and if you're willing to invest some of your personal assets, we could restructure the division. But it would cost you approximately 60 million out of pocket." Emma looked between the two men, her bright green eyes serious. "Mr. Richard, remember what my mama used to say? She said the measure of a person ain't how much money they got, but what they do with it when other people are hurting." Richard felt something shift inside his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced in the courtroom. This child, who'd had nothing, understood generosity better than adults who'd had everything. James, start the paperwork to save those jobs, all of them. 2 months after the courtroom drama, the Chicago Tribune ran a front-page story titled, "From Betrayal to Redemption, How a Homeless Child Saved a Business Empire." Richard sat in his study, reading the article aloud to Emma, who was curled up in an oversized leather chair, wearing brand-new pajamas, her auburn curls freshly washed and shining. "Listen to this part," Richard chuckled. 7-year-old Emma Thompson, now living with billionaire Richard Blackwood, has become his unofficial advisor on matters both personal and professional. Employees at Blackwood Enterprises report that the child regularly visits the construction sites, asking workers about their families and ensuring they have adequate safety equipment. Emma giggled, covering her mouth with both hands. "They make me sound real important, but I just like talking to people and making sure they're okay." Margaret knocked on the study door, her expression unusually emotional. At 62, she'd worked for the Blackwood family for 30 years, watching Richard's marriage slowly deteriorate. Now she was witnessing his transformation through the eyes of a child. "Mr. Blackwood, there's someone here to see Miss Emma, a woman from Child Protective Services." Emma's face immediately went pale, her small body tensing with remembered fear. "Are they going to take me away? Did I do something wrong?" Richard felt his protective instincts flare. "Over my dead body," he said firmly, then softened his voice for Emma. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Nobody's taking you anywhere you don't want to go." The CPS worker, a tired-looking woman in her 40s named Janet Morris, entered with a briefcase and official documents. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm here to discuss Emma's permanent living situation. We've completed our investigation and frankly, it's complicated." "What's complicated about it?" Richard asked, his voice carrying an edge that had intimidated business rivals for decades. "Emma has no living relatives. Her mother died intestate, leaving no will or guardian designation. Technically, she should be placed in the foster care system while we search for suitable family placement." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Richard, I don't want to go to foster care. The kids at the shelter told me stories about foster care, and they were real scary." Richard's heart clenched. His heart. In 2 months, this child had become the center of his world, bringing life and meaning to days that had been empty for years. The thought of losing her was unbearable. "What would it take to make this permanent?" he asked Janet directly. "Adoption," she replied simply, "but it's a lengthy process. Background checks, home studies, psychological evaluations, court hearings, and honestly, Mr. Blackwood, your recent divorce and the criminal charges against your ex-wife complicate matters." Emma slipped out of her chair and walked to Richard, taking his hand with surprising firmness. "Mr. Richard, do you want to be my daddy? Like for real and forever?" The question hung in the air like a prayer. Richard looked down at this remarkable child who had saved his life in more ways than she could understand. She'd exposed the lies that were destroying him, brought joy back into his empty mansion, taught him about generosity and courage, and shown him what unconditional love looked like. "Emma, I would be honored to be your father," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "If you'll have me." Emma launched herself into his arms, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, I want you to be my daddy, forever and ever." Janet Morris watched this exchange with professional interest and personal emotion. In 15 years of social work, she'd seen countless placements, but the genuine love between this man and child was undeniable. "There's something else," Janet said quietly. "Emma, we found something in your mother's personal effects that the hospital had stored. Your mother wrote you a letter before she died." Emma's grip on Richard tightened. "A letter? For me?" Janet pulled out a sealed envelope with "For my beautiful Emma" written in shaky handwriting. "She asked the nurses to make sure you got this when you were in a safe place with people who loved you." With trembling fingers, Emma opened the envelope. Richard held her close as she read her mother's final words aloud. "My darling Emma, if you're reading this, it means you found your way to safety and love. I always knew you were special, brave enough to stand up for what's right, take care of your new family the way you took care of me. I love you forever. Mama." 6 months after the adoption papers were filed, Richard and Emma had settled into a routine that brought both of them more happiness than either had known in years. Spring was blooming in Chicago, and Emma's 9th birthday was approaching. Though they'd discovered her actual birth date had been recorded incorrectly, she was actually 8, not 7, which explained her remarkable maturity. "Daddy Richard," Emma called from the garden where she was helping Margaret plant flowers. The title had evolved naturally from Mr. Richard to Daddy Richard to simply Daddy as their bond deepened. "There's a fancy car coming up the driveway, and it don't look like any of our usual visitors." Richard looked out the window to see a black sedan with government plates. His stomach tightened. Official visits rarely brought good news. The doorbell rang, and Margaret answered, returning with 2 serious-looking federal agents. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Financial Crimes Division. This is Agent Martinez. We need to discuss your brother's case." Emma appeared in the doorway, instinctively positioning herself near Richard. Months of security had helped heal her trauma, but she remained protective of the people she loved. "Is it okay if Emma stays?" Richard asked. "She's been part of this from the beginning, and she deserves to know what's happening." Agent Chen nodded. "Actually, Emma's testimony may be crucial to our case. Marcus Blackwood and Victoria Blackwood have been arrested on multiple federal charges: fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and racketeering. The evidence Emma provided led us to uncover a network of corruption involving city contracts and bribes to building inspectors." Emma's eyes widened. "They were doing even more bad things?" "Much more," Agent Martinez confirmed. "Your Uncle Marcus was paying city officials to approve substandard construction materials. 3 buildings constructed with these materials have structural problems that could endanger lives." Richard felt sick. "How many people could have been hurt?" "Potentially hundreds," Agent Chen replied. "But because Emma spoke up, we caught it before any catastrophic failures occurred. She literally saved lives by exposing this conspiracy." Emma processed this information with the seriousness of a child who'd grown up faster than she should have. "So, when I found those papers and told the truth in court, I didn't just save Daddy Richard from paying money for a baby that wasn't his. You exposed a criminal enterprise that was putting innocent families at risk," Agent Martinez said. "Buildings where children live and play." The weight of this revelation settled over the room. Emma's simple act of courage had had far-reaching consequences she'd never imagined. "There's something else," Agent Chen continued. "Marcus and Victoria have agreed to plea bargains in exchange for their cooperation. They'll serve reduced sentences, but will have to make full restitution. We've recovered 31 million of the stolen funds so far." "What about the people who might have lost their jobs?" Emma asked, always thinking of others first. Richard smiled, still amazed by her compassion. "I told you, sweetheart, we saved all those jobs. And now, with some of the stolen money coming back, we can give everyone bonuses this Christmas." Emma clapped her hands with delight. "Really? All the construction workers will have good Christmas presents for their kids?" "The best Christmas they've had in years," Richard promised. Agent Chen gathered her files, preparing to leave. "Mr. Blackwood, there's one more thing. The Chicago District Attorney wants to recommend Emma for a Civic Courage Award. Her actions demonstrated extraordinary bravery for someone her age." Emma looked puzzled. "An award? But I just told the truth. Isn't that what everyone's supposed to do?" "Unfortunately, not everyone has your courage," Agent Martinez said. "Most people would have stayed silent to protect themselves." After the agents left, Emma curled up next to Richard on the couch, processing everything they'd learned. "Daddy, do you think my mama would be proud of me?" Richard hugged her close, his heart full. "Emma, your mother would be incredibly proud. You saved me. You saved hundreds of families from dangerous buildings. You helped catch criminals, and you showed everyone what real courage looks like." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I miss her sometimes, but I'm glad she sent me to find you. I think maybe she knew we needed each other." I think you're exactly right," Richard whispered, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. We definitely needed each other. 1 year after the courtroom revelation, Emma's official adoption day had finally arrived. The same courthouse that had witnessed the exposure of Marcus and Victoria's betrayal would now witness the legal creation of a new family built on love and trust. Judge Morrison, now retired but specially requested to preside over the ceremony, smiled warmly as Richard and Emma entered the courtroom. Emma wore a beautiful white dress that Margaret had helped her pick out, her auburn hair decorated with tiny flowers. She looked healthy, confident, and radiant, a stark contrast to the frightened, desperate child who'd burst through these doors a year ago. "Well, Miss Emma," Judge Morrison said warmly, "I must say you look considerably different than the last time I saw you in my courtroom." Emma giggled, twirling to show off her dress. "I got new clothes and everything, Your Honor, and I learned proper grammar from my tutor, though I still talk regular sometimes when I get excited." The courtroom was packed with supporters, employees from Blackwood Enterprises, Margaret and the household staff, James Patterson, and even some of the construction workers whose jobs Emma had helped save. News crews were present, documenting this remarkable conclusion to a story that had captivated Chicago. "Your Honor," Richard began formally, "I request legal adoption of Emma Rose Thompson to be renamed Emma Rose Blackwood." Emma had chosen to keep her mother's middle name as her first middle name, making her full name Emma Rose Marie Blackwood, a beautiful bridge between her past and future. Judge Morrison reviewed the extensive documentation, psychological evaluations showing Emma's remarkable resilience and adjustment, home studies confirming the loving environment Richard provided, character references from teachers, neighbors, and employees who'd witnessed their bond. "Emma," Judge Morrison addressed her directly, "do you understand what adoption means? That Mr. Blackwood would become your legal father with all the rights and responsibilities that entails?" Emma nodded solemnly. "It means we're a real family forever, not just people who live in the same house. It means he'll take care of me and love me even when I make mistakes, and I'll take care of him and love him even when he's grumpy in the morning." The courtroom erupted in gentle laughter. Richard's eyes filled with tears at her perfect understanding of family. "And Mr. Blackwood," Judge Morrison continued, "do you understand the lifelong commitment you're making to love, protect, guide, and provide for Emma as your own daughter? Your Honor, Emma saved my life in ways that go far beyond exposing lies and fraud. She taught me what family really means, what love without conditions looks like, and what it means to put someone else's well-being before your own. I would be honored to be her father for the rest of my life." Emma bounced slightly on her toes, unable to contain her excitement. "Judge Morrison, can I say something important?" "Of course, dear. I want everyone to know that Daddy Richard is the best daddy in the whole world. He reads me stories every night, teaches me about business so I can help people when I grow up, and he never gets mad when I ask too many questions. And he keeps pictures of my mama on my dresser so I never forget her, but he doesn't get sad about it. He says love makes families bigger, not smaller." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the hardened news reporters were wiping their faces. Judge Morrison raised the gavel that had once threatened Richard's financial ruin, and now would seal his greatest joy. "By the power vested in me by the state of Illinois, I hereby grant the petition for adoption. Emma Rose Thompson is now legally Emma Rose Marie Blackwood, daughter of Richard James Blackwood." The gavel fell, and Emma launched herself into Richard's arms as the courtroom erupted in applause. They were officially family, bound by law, but held together by something much stronger, love that had been tested by fire and proven unbreakable. "I love you, Daddy," Emma whispered in his ear. "I love you too, daughter," Richard replied, the word daughter carrying all the weight of dreams he'd never dared to have. As photographers captured the moment, Emma looked over Richard's shoulder at the courtroom full of people celebrating their family. A year ago, she'd been a homeless orphan with nothing but courage. Now she had a father who adored her, a home filled with love, and a future bright with possibilities. "Daddy," she whispered. "I think this is the best day of my whole life." "Mine too, sweetheart," Richard replied. "Mine too." 2 years after the adoption, Emma had grown into a confident 10-year-old who split her time between private tutoring, charitable work with her father's foundation, and what she called important business meetings, which usually involved her offering advice on everything from employee benefits to building designs. On this particular December morning, Emma was in Richard's office at Blackwood Enterprises, carefully reviewing architectural plans for a new community centre they were funding. Her desk, a smaller version of Richard's, sat perpendicular to his, positioned so they could work together while maintaining their individual spaces. "Daddy, I think the playground needs more swings," Emma announced, looking up from the blueprints with serious green eyes. "And maybe we should add a memorial garden for kids who lost their mamas and daddies so they have a peaceful place to remember them." Richard paused in his review of quarterly reports, continually amazed by Emma's insights. In 2 years, she'd helped him redesign their company's approach to community involvement, always focusing on the human element that business leaders often overlooked. "That's a beautiful idea, sweetheart. Why don't you sketch out what you're thinking?" Before Emma could answer, Margaret knocked and entered with a visitor, a well-dressed woman in her 30s, carrying legal documents and wearing an expression that immediately put Richard on alert. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Helen Crawford from the State Attorney's Office. She has some important news about Marcus and Victoria." Emma set down her colored pencils, her protective instincts still sharp. "Is everything okay? Are the bad people trying to cause trouble again?" Helen Crawford smiled reassuringly at Emma. "Nothing bad, sweetheart. Actually, I'm here with some very good news. Marcus and Victoria's sentences are being extended, and we've recovered the remaining stolen money. All of it." Richard straightened in his chair. "All of it? That's over $16 million we hadn't recovered." "Correct. We found accounts in Switzerland and Monaco that they'd hidden from us. With penalties and interest, the total recovery is actually $22 million. Helen placed the documents on Richard's desk. "But there's something else. Victoria wants to see Emma." Emma's expression grew guarded. "Why does she want to see me? Is she going to be mean and yell at me for telling the truth?" "She says she wants to apologize," Helen explained. "She's been in therapy, working through her issues, and she claims she wants to make amends. But Emma, you absolutely don't have to see her if you don't want to. The choice is entirely yours." Richard watched his daughter's face carefully. Emma had grown so much in 2 years, but the trauma of abandonment and betrayal still occasionally surfaced. "What do you think, sweetheart? There's no right or wrong answer here." Emma was quiet for a long moment, her 10-year-old mind working through complex emotions. Finally, she looked up at both adults. I think I want to see her. Not because I forgive her for hurting Daddy, but because Mama always taught me that when people apologize for real, we should listen. And maybe if she's really sorry, it might help her be a better person." Helen Crawford was impressed by Emma's maturity. "We could arrange a supervised meeting at the correctional facility with you and your father present, of course." "I want Daddy there," Emma said firmly, "and I want to be able to leave if she says mean things or tries to make excuses." "Absolutely," Helen agreed. "It would be entirely on your terms." "The deal." After Helen left, Emma climbed into Richard's lap, something she still did when she needed comfort or was processing difficult emotions. "Daddy, do you think I'm doing the right thing?" Richard held her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Emma, you've never steered us wrong yet. Never steered us. Your instincts about people are better than most adults I know. If you think you should see Victoria, then I trust your judgment." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I don't miss her, you know. She was never really nice to me when I lived at Uncle Marcus's house. But I keep thinking about what you taught me about forgiveness being something we do for ourselves, not for other people." "You're absolutely right," Richard said, marveling again at her wisdom. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what someone did or letting them hurt you again. It means letting go of the anger so it doesn't poison your own heart." Emma nodded solemnly. I think I want to hear what she has to say, and if she's really sorry, maybe that will help me let go of the last bit of angry feelings I have. But Daddy? Yes, sweetheart? No matter what she says, you're my real daddy now. And this is my real family. She can't change that, right? Richard hugged her tighter. Nothing and nobody can ever change that, Emma. We're family forever, legally and in every way that matters. Emma smiled and returned to her architectural plans. Good. Now, about those swings. 6 months later, Richard and Emma sat in the visiting room of the minimum security women's correctional facility, waiting for Victoria to arrive. Emma, now 10 and a half, had chosen her outfit carefully. A simple blue dress that her mother would have been proud of, neither too fancy nor too casual. She held Richard's hand tightly, her other hand clutching a small photo of her mother. When Victoria entered, the change was dramatic. Gone was the perfectly coiffed socialite who had tried to steal nearly $1 billion. This woman looked older, humbler, wearing simple prison clothes and no makeup. Her pregnancy had ended in a miscarriage 3 months after her arrest, a tragedy that, despite everything, Emma had felt sorry about. Victoria sat across from them, her hands shaking slightly. At 40, she looked decades older than her years. Emma, I don't know where to begin. Emma studied Victoria's face with the careful attention she'd learned from watching Richard evaluate business deals. Why don't you start with why you wanted to see me? Because you're the bravest person I've ever known, Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. And because I owe you an apology that I should have given you 2 years ago. Richard remained silent, letting Emma lead the conversation as they'd agreed. I'm listening, Emma said simply. Victoria took a shaky breath. Emma, what Marcus and I did was unforgivable. We lied, we cheated, we stole, and we hurt people who trusted us. But the worst part, the part that haunts me every single day, is that we ignored a child who needed help. You were living in that servant room, taking care of yourself after your mother died, and instead of helping you, we saw you as a problem to be hidden away. Emma's expression didn't change, but her grip on Richard's hand loosened slightly. When you stood up in that courtroom, Victoria continued, tears streaming down her face, you showed more integrity at 7, 8 years old than I showed in 40 years of life. You could have stayed invisible, stayed safe, but you chose to tell the truth, even though it was scary and dangerous. It was the right thing to do, Emma said simply. My mama taught me to always tell the truth, especially when it's hard. Victoria nodded, sobbing now. Your mother raised an extraordinary daughter, and Richard, you've given her the family and love she always deserved. Emma, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that seeing your courage changed me. I'm getting help, real help, and I'm trying to become someone who would make better choices. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing Victoria's words. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady and wise beyond her years. Mrs. Victoria, I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to angry feelings hurts me more than it hurts you. My daddy taught me that. Victoria's sobs intensified. Emma, you're incredible. Richard, you're so lucky to have her as your daughter. I know, Richard said quietly. She saved my life in every way that matters. Emma reached across the table and gently touched Victoria's hand. Mrs. Victoria, I hope you keep getting better and learning to make good choices. And maybe someday, when you get out, you can help other people who are hurting, the way my daddy helps people now. The visit lasted another half hour, with Victoria asking about Emma's school, her interests, her dreams for the future. When it was time to leave, Victoria hugged Emma carefully. Thank you for giving me a chance to apologize, Victoria whispered. Be happy, sweetheart. You deserve all the happiness in the world. In the car driving home, Emma was thoughtful and quiet. Finally, she turned to Richard. Daddy, I'm glad we went. She really was sorry, and now I don't have any angry feelings left about what happened. How do you feel? Richard asked. Emma smiled, her face radiant with peace. Free, like the last heavy thing I was carrying around is gone, and grateful, so grateful that all those bad things that happened led me to you and our family." Richard pulled into their driveway, looking at their beautiful home where Margaret waited with dinner and homework help, where Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator, where family photos showed the evolution of their unlikely love story. "Emma, do you know what I'm most proud of about you?" "What, Daddy?" "Not just your courage, although that's extraordinary. Not just your kindness, although that changes everyone around you. I'm most proud that you've taken all the hard things that happened to you, losing your mama, being abandoned, living on the streets, and instead of letting them make you bitter or angry, you've used them to become more compassionate, more generous, more determined to help other people." Emma considered this. "Mama used to say that we can't choose what happens to us, but we can choose what we do with it. I think I chose to use the sad things to understand other people who are sad, and to make sure I never make anyone else feel invisible or unimportant." As they walked into their home together, Richard reflected on how completely his life had transformed. 3 years ago, he'd been a successful but empty man, betrayed by everyone he trusted. Now he was the father of the most remarkable child he'd ever known. A girl who taught him that family isn't about blood or legal documents. It's about choosing to love someone completely and being chosen in return. "Daddy," Emma said, hanging up her coat, "I love our family." "I love our family too, sweetheart," Richard replied, watching her skip toward the kitchen where Margaret was probably waiting with fresh cookies and stories about her day. "More than I ever imagined possible." That night, as Richard tucked Emma into bed and read her favorite story, he marveled at the truth that a homeless 8-year-old's courage had led not just to justice, but to the deepest love of his life. Emma had saved more than his fortune or his reputation. She'd saved his heart, his soul, and his faith in what family could be. "Daddy," Emma murmured sleepily, "do you think Mama can see us now?" "I think she sees us, and I think she's very happy that we found each other." Emma smiled and closed her eyes. "Good. I want her to know I kept my promise to take care of my new family." "You've kept your promise perfectly, sweetheart. Sweet dreams." A day, as Richard turned off the light, he whispered a silent thank you to Emma's mother, wherever she was, for raising a daughter brave enough to tell the truth and loving enough to heal a broken man's heart. Their family had been born from betrayal and trauma, but it had been built on truth, courage, and unconditional love, the strongest foundation of all.